Hello, everybody out there in radio or internet land. Y'all listening to Media Ciphers here on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Right now, I'm joined by a couple of special guests who are here. We're going to be talking about this really important upcoming rally in Lansing, as well as some of the things them and their organization is doing around housing rights and housing equity. Something we've talked about a lot on the show before, and there's really important event coming up on September 5th that we're going to be talking about. But before we really jump into that, first, could y'all just introduce yourselves for the listening audience, as well as the organization you're on here representing?
Yeah. Thank you for having us, Andy. We're super excited to be here to talk. All right. My name is Tristen Jessup. We are affiliated with We the People Michigan Action Fund. They are a progressive political advocacy organization that's part of here in Michigan. They've got groups in Detroit and Lansing and Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo, some folks in other areas as well, Traverse City. And they've been working on a variety of grassroots progressive campaign for, I don't know, the last 3 to 5 years, I think. One of their most recent one was working on trying to help the immigrant community with getting IDs and driver's license in the state as well. And they identified with this Dem majority that we have in the Congress. They identified that perhaps this is the time that we can all come together to go after this state preemption law that's preventing us all from having any power over rent in this state. So that's how we kind of got involved in this project. That's how it started. And then my colleague here, Eli, if I can pass it on to you.
Hello, my name is Eli Persich. I have been working on this campaign since about April, been attending meetings pretty much since then, and I am currently involved with two different committees through We the People.
Okay, great. Thank you for introducing yourself, and also just thank you for doing the work that you're doing. I'm sure I'll talk at length about a little bit further in the interview, but we want to kind of get into the questions, as it were. So, Tristan, as you mentioned, your group in particular has been working on getting these sort of legislative protections for renters, and that includes trying to kind of overturn some of the constrictions on rent control that exist here in the state of Michigan. I was wondering if you could illuminate our listeners on some of the strategies involved, the progress you've made. Maybe you talk a little bit about kind of that important relationship between kind of that grassroots organizing and trying to put the pressure on the legislature to get some good things passed.
So I think that to understand how the fight is our strategy. Really, you have to kind of understand what the laws are in our state and in many other states, and how the law treats rent control in the state of Michigan. In our state, there is a law, we call it the preemption law, the state preemption law. It's PA 226 of 1988. And we'll get into a little bit more about the history of it later, but basically this preemption law prevents any local municipalities from passing laws that would affect how much a private owner is allowed to charge in rent on their property. The law was it was first of all, rent control was very popular when the law was originally passed, and it was passed in reaction to rent control being passed in Detroit at the time in 1988. And it's been 35 years of this. We've gone up 130% in median rent in the state, and we've only gone up 22% in median. Yes.
Just real quick, just for maybe some of the younger people listening who have grown up mostly in a capitalist hellscape, could you quickly define what rent control is and like what it would look like in practice?
Absolutely. Yeah. Rent control is okay. So basically just refers to any law that would dictate how much rent a person is allowed to charge on rental property, as well as when they are allowed to increase rent and by what amount they're allowed to increase. So if you have any law that controls any of that, people refer to that as rent control. Now, nowadays, I think the more politically correct term, and when we're communicating with legislators a lot, we use the term rent regulation more regularly. People might hear that term. Most recently, with the COVID lockdowns, people might have heard the term rent stabilization a lot, and that usually refers to a more like emergency measure that's taken to prevent rent from going up, like during the COVID lockdowns in some of the states. Um, but yeah, I hope that kind of describes what it is. With regard to our strategy, then. You and I organized in years past with the KSP and with the city commission run, and a lot of our efforts were directed towards trying to get some rent control in the city of Kalamazoo. And we came up against the wall that is this preemption law. And so overturning this preemption law is like step one in providing local governments and county governments the power to enact new laws and to try new ways of trying to provide relief to renters and tenants in the state. And so our goal is to try to convince these left-leaning legislators in our primarily Democratic Congress to join their working class, constituents and to overturn this preemption law. And we even trying to get them to, they're discussing potentially trying to pass a renter's bill of rights, a tenant bill of rights, as we discussed here in the city of Kalamazoo not too long ago. So yeah, so that is our general strategy. With regard to progress, we've spoken with a number of legislators over the last few months, and we've already got people on our side at the State House. And we have I don't want to go into specifics at the moment, just because I want them to be able to speak to their constituents directly. But we do have folks who have agreed to fight for this bill to try to get the preemption law overturned. Folks who in the past have already expressed an interest. There are even some legislators sometimes in Congress right now who have already brought the preemption bill to the table within the last 10 years. So there's definitely movement, and we're continuing to meet with legislators over the next few months. We really want to try to get this passed before the end of the year. So it's like the big goal. Eli, if you'd like to speak a little bit to our strategy, we decided to break up a little bit into because there's so many people involved in the project statewide. We've had to break off into subcommittees. Personally, I'm working in the research and outreach subcommittees for the state home team with We the People. Eli, do you want to go into what your responsibilities are?
So for the statewide committees, I am currently a part of two different committees. I'm working with the communications committee and alongside Tristen with the outreach committee. So for the communications committee, we are in the works of developing some cross-platform content. I can't really give out too much info on it, but you can like We the People MI Action Fund on Facebook or follow at We the People _Michigan on Instagram to stay up to date on any progress with the campaign. Basically, we're coming up with all sorts of ideas of ways to help get people engaged, help get more information, try to bust some myths about rent control. There's some evil myths that the landlords and the capitalists like to spread about how rent control will be bad for everyone. And so we're working on developing all sorts of content to kind of help break up those kinds of myths and all the lies that are being shared.
Okay, you're touching me right in the cockles of my heart there, because that's one of the main things to try to do on this show is kind of myth busting the corporate media and stuff. So um so great, great and insightful. And thank you for again, thank you for doing that work out there. Um so next thing I wanted to kind of pivot towards, and we touched on this a little bit, kind of referring back to um, kind of the some of the terms and ideas that are coming out of the pandemic. But for a lot of people, most of the folks listening, 2020 was something of an awakening, and we've really seen, whether you're talking about labor unions or you've seen tenants unions popping up across the country, but we're really starting to see working people kind of reasserting themselves, starting to kind of like assert themselves and their rights, getting a little bit more radical. How do you think this dynamic is played out when it comes to housing, and how has it helped fuel the work of We the People and maybe even just this housing coalition more broadly?
So with regard to the pandemic, I like that you used the word that it was like this awakening, right? I think that the pandemic did wake a lot of people up to a couple of realities, right, about our society. Um, Firstly, being that the people who rule over us, that the really, really wealthy elite who rule this country, right? They really don't give a crap if we live or die, right? As long as we continue to work our butts off to make them money in the process. And uh, it also revealed to a lot of people that this system that we have erected around us, right? The infrastructure, the healthcare, the food, the housing, the education, all these things that we have around us exist almost as like this house of cards. And it's like the the next crisis, any single thing could come through and it just collapses upon itself, right? And it's for that reason that they, they were forced to end the mask mandates and end the lockdowns prematurely. And now we are stuck with this endemic COVID virus that keeps mutating every 6 months or so. And, long COVID and everything else that's going on with that. And although some people can see like they say the ignorance, so people don't believe the science and stuff like that. There is always this economic component as well. Right? They need us working. They need us back doing that. They need us paying the rent. That's for darn sure. And to that effect, when the lockdowns began, and thousands of people got laid off or lost their jobs or were unable to work. And so thousands of people were unable to pay their rent, and people were begging the state for relief, right? And our legislators are like, well, honestly, we can't legally do anything because 90% of all the states have an identical preemption law to Michigan's, and so even if they wanted to, they would have to get rid of that first. Right. And so, and anytime like they try to pass like emergency rent stabilization, the first thing landlords are going to do is going to sue the state and they're going to say that's against this law that we have. Right. And that's justifiably that's pissed off a lot of people. Right. They're like, well, where's our power? Where's our right? Like, why do they get relief and we don't have any right? And um, I feel like if I think they're starting to recognize that if we had a system that was built by us and worked for us, when these crises arise, we wouldn't be left in the dust, right? We wouldn't be left to suffer in the streets, right, and lose our homes just because of a global pandemic that we had no control over, right? So that's kind of how I see the situation. Why I see a lot of people starting to join this project. A lot of people are very enthusiastic about this topic in particular. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Eli, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think you put it really well. This is something I see every day, just like through with my like at work. I see people who can't even afford to exist in our current system, and they're getting fed up. I have coworkers who are working two jobs right now while also taking classes at Western, just trying to find a way out of poverty. And it's to the point where I, like many other people, are getting really, really tired of seeing the people around me just destroy ourselves just to barely scrape by, like keep a roof over our head. And I think for me, that's really what's kind of fueling my passion for this work at this point is just I don't want to see people struggling anymore.
There's so many stories like that, and worse, so many. Like,
Mhm.
and like everyone you talk to has a story about something, some way that they're being exploited, they're being overcharged, they're being taken advantage of by, private owners and private developers and corrupt politicians in the state. It's really, really, really frustrating.
Mhm.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I just kind of refer back to Tristen mentioned earlier, you were when I ran for office a couple years ago, you were my campaign manager. And one of the things that we found because we were really trying to kind of do some problem mapping around Kalamazoo. The number one thing that people complained about was renters' rights and how, again, the outsized power of landlords in the community.
Mhm.
Which one I think just goes to stand like even this has been a problem for quite some time, and again that law has really been a huge tool in their toolbox to prevent any sort of equity from coming to the surface. So with that, I want to talk a little bit more about like who are the interests involved that I kind of like who is the opposition as far as the landlord class that is trying to prevent this fight against renters' rights. And again, at a broader level, living in uncertain times. We've got rising fascism, and in a lot of ways, we see capitalists, real estate capitalists, landlords kind of circling the wagons in the time of all this escalating crisis. Just quick example, while we're talking about rent control right now, rent control is in the crosshairs of the Supreme Court. So I wanted to ask, not only how you think the fight for housing rights kind of tie into kind of these broader conditions. But again, who are some of these key forces, particularly here in the state of Michigan, who are pushing back against, this fight for renters' rights and for the repeal of this law?
So, um, well, just that question in particular, the way that I personally and many of our fellow organizers kind of organize the way that we view the opposition to this is private owners and private developers and corrupt politicians. So we've got people who, landlords, apartment complexes, those types of things, people who own the property and are renting it out. And then you've got the developers who are um, partnered with the private owners to basically to exploit an easily exploitable market, like freely exploitable market, because they can increase rent as much as they want. And like even when like our state passes laws to like prevent eviction, all they have to do is price us out of the apartment, right? They don't have to actually evict us or anything. So there's so many loopholes and everything. So and then they use the funds that they extract from hardworking Michiganders to go lobby our politicians and say, we'll help pay for your next campaign if you agree that, rent control is not something that we want for the state, right? And you mentioned this. You said the crosshairs. The Supreme Court has it in the crosshairs. I don't know if the Supreme Court has it in the crosshairs, but there are definitely capitalist forces that do have rent control in the crosshairs, and they always have, right? So like if you look at the way that the preemption law came to be, right? So rent control started off in like Berkeley, California, and then there was a Supreme Court decision in 1986, Fisher versus Berkeley, that determined that rent control was not illegal by the Constitution, even though landlords were trying their hardest to declare it was. And so they shifted their strategy, right? They shifted from trying to use the Supreme Court to get rid of rent control to let's stop it before they can pass these laws. So then they go to Michigan, and then they propagandize people in Ann Arbor and against it, and then they managed to pass the preemption law. And then every other state that is, oh, we're desperate to get rid of rent control, but the Supreme Court just got rid of it. Every other state copies us, right? So I look at this recent thing going on in New York and California, and the argument that they're using is they're trying to say that rent control it violates the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment, is what they're saying. They're saying that because you are preventing possible future profits, that equates to unlawful like property seizure. Like so like you're not allowed to like seize their property without due process. But the problem with that logically is that, like, first of all, future profits are not property you currently possess, right? The property that the property owners possess is the house, the apartment complex. That's the actual property. What they are trying to petition for is the right to lease that property at a cost to another person. Right. And so there is no property loss. We're not, like, I say this specifically when we're doing organizing as well. I'm like, guys, this is not, we're not trying to sell socialism or anything. People are still allowed to own property in the state of Michigan. Landlords still exist. People are allowed to own private property and make money with that private property. All we want to do is protect the tenants, protect the working class from exploitation from people who are taking advantage of an unregulated economy. And personally, I don't think that their arguments are going to hold water in the Supreme Court. And there are already so many states that have the preemption law that I don't know if even the Supreme Court will view it as like this is a necessity, right? Because rent control is already illegal for so many states. It's just that New York City, like New York and California, still have it. So like that's where the fight continues, right? Like the on their front, right? Even though on our front, we are definitely still trying to get rid of this preemption law, hardcore, right? Um, and yeah, so the it's always the same people, right? It's you have to view it like look who benefits from having the preemption law, and look who is harmed by it. Like the people who benefit are the property owners and private developers. The people who are harmed are the tenants, the workers. And we don't like that situation. Like we personally believe that the constituents, the residents, the workers of Michigan should come first. And I think a lot of people would agree.
Yeah, Eli, anything to add to that?
Not really. No, I think Tristan really got to the heart of it and put it into some pretty good words.
Yeah, I also want to thank you too for that historical context. I didn't know that before about kind of the history of the law and how it came to be in Michigan, even like how it kind of inspired that kind of
Oh yeah,
reactionary
absolutely.
playbook. Yeah.
If you want to know more, it actually passed. So 19 right before the preemption law was passed, Detroit passed the state's first rent control measure, but it never actually got to be enacted because right after it passed, it was like reactionary forces are on it, right? They propagandized people in Ann Arbor by telling them that taxes for homeowners are going to go up. And so all the people in Arbor are like, "Ooh, we're scared we're going to have our taxes go up," and so then they vote no on it. It was like an enormous. You should go back and look at some of the newspapers from that time. It's heated. So, but as soon as the law was passed, it was like, okay, I guess it's all off the books, and they copied that playbook all over the country.
Wow, fascinating. So I think now let's pivot again. We started at the top talking about this rally that's coming up. I believe it's called the "Rent is Too Damn High" rally. Of course, going back to that famous quote from was it the early 2010s or late 2000s? But I want to ask, how did your organization get involved in this rally, and what are some of the goals and shared principles of this coalition, and kind of the reason behind getting together at the state capitol? I believe it's going to be Tuesday, September 5th at noon.
At
Is that
noon.
correct?
At noon. Yep. So Rent is Too Damn High is a Lansing-based organization. And one of the primary one of our Lansing organizer is involved in it very strongly. I'm not quite sure all of the details of how they originated, but it is a very large group. They are expecting upwards of 600 to 700 people to come out on the 5th. And with regard to our shared goals, we have the exact same goals. Our goals are to overturn the preemption law in order to empower local municipalities to pass legislation that is unique to their regional like needs, right? The people who are living in their area, because the people who are living on the east side of the state might not have the same needs as the people who are living over here in Kalamazoo, right? And uh, allowing us to finally test some of these other types of policy to try to help renters and tenants in the state of Michigan. And so we're really, really excited about the 5th. We're really excited about showing legislators just how much action is behind this right now, and how much energy is behind this movement. And we really hope people will come on out. Eli, anything?
I just want to add that, because transportation is such a big issue, We the People has been working, we have other things that we're working on in the area. And so those groups are also most likely going to be traveling there on the 5th. So if anyone's looking for rides or needs any sort of transportation, get in contact with us and we can try to organize a ride for you to get there. We want as many people to show up as possible.
All right, great. And again, everybody listening out there in Radio Land, that is going to be Tuesday, September 5th at 12 p.m. Your humble radio host is going to be there covering stuff and maybe doing some chanting, some sign waving, as one does.
Same.
Um, so I want to close out a really important question. Just folks listening in, how would you recommend Kalamazoo residents, both, if they're interested in what y'all have been talking about, how they can maybe get involved or help your organization? But also the second piece of that question is, for folks here in the Kalamazoo community who might, they themselves being faced with a form of housing injustice, maybe they're being threatened with eviction or their living conditions are poor or, the rent is too damn high. What would you recommend for those folks?
Um, that's a big question. So the first half of the question, how can they get involved with us specifically? So firstly, Eli's going to be out at Bronco Bash on Tuesday, and I think this is coming out on Tuesday as well. So if you're listening to this, get down to Bronco Bash, look for Eli. They're going to be passing out flyers there. We're going to be passing out flyers at several events over the next month as well. We are planning on having a couple of outreach events coming up, so hopefully one in September. And I told you about we're trying to do a tabling event in October as well. Hopefully October 6th, if you guys are going to be down at Bronson Park, that's the plan. Assuming we can get it all through. We and I will pass on like a QR code and stuff. If you could maybe include that with the link to this, then they can look us up. We have a volunteer survey. We'd love to have folks. Sorry, my husband is waving at me. Okay. Um, and sorry, I'm having some pet issues, so he's gonna take off. But with regards to how folks can really like fight for their rights with this regard, it's a challenge, because the preemption law has prevented us from having a lot of like organization, right? And that's what we really, really need. And we need people who are tenants and renters in the city of Kalamazoo to come together to form literal unions. We need people to come together to form like renters organizations that will defend the interests of renters in their area. And I feel like the real struggle we have with bringing people into those types of organizations is that we need to be able to promise like material gains by being a part of that. And the only way that we can promise that is by getting rid of the preemption law. That way we can say, if we join this, if we come together locally, then we can and the preemption law is overturned, then we can really start making some serious change here to try to protect the interests of workers and tenants in city of Kalamazoo and the state of Michigan. Let's see. Just as a last note, just keep an eye out for some upcoming events coming up in September and October. And please, if you can, get down to Lansing on the 5th at noon to join us. We're expecting hundreds of people, so we'd really like to see you there. You can meet the folks from We the People. You can meet us, and we'd love to have you on board. So, Eli, anything you'd like to add?
You put it really well. It's all about numbers.
Yeah.
We have more strength when we work together, when we come together and really get involved in the fight. And so just if you're in Kalamazoo and you want to get involved, please do. The communications committee is looking for so many people, artists, photographers, videographers, writers. We need help making the content to get out there. We need help reaching people. We're looking for people who can help with signing petitions or getting signatures for them, for calling legislators, contacting your friends who are working class folks and just spreading the word. I also like to recommend, in case for anybody who's dealing with, issues with renting, it really does make a difference if you just learn what your rights are. If you just know what's allowed and what's not allowed, it goes a long way. I've noticed that landlords especially have a way of like abusing their control. They abuse their control and they kind of profit off the fact that most tenants don't know what their rights are. So they don't know what's allowed and not allowed. And so, it's important to know those things. I always tell people a good point is to go to the Kalamazoo Public Library. They have a law library in the basement that I've had multiple friends go through and get answers on things that their landlord was doing that turns out they were illegal. And they were able to get some relief and some justice in those situations. So just it really does make a difference if you know what can and can't be done. And then, like Tristen mentioned, I will be at Bronco Bash handing out flyers, and I believe the flyers will have that QR code as well. So if you want to just get that volunteer sign up done, then come meet with me. You can ask me questions. I will gladly talk to you one on one about what you're interested in doing and what we could use you for. But we'd love to see you.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you taking time out of your weekend to talk to folks in the Kalamazoo area about these issues. Quick little side note. If you are currently facing any of these challenges that we were just talking about, um, feel free to hit us up on the show. And there is there used to be an active tenants union here in Kalamazoo. We've it's kind of gone dark or on hiatus, whatever you want to call it. But there is still important information on that page that kind of break down some of the local resources and important strategies and how if you're dealing with a corrupt landlord. That's Greater Kalamazoo Renters Union. But in any case, I'm so glad that this work continues and that we're that there's folks out there who are kind of seizing this moment to try to repeal this very onerous and bad law that's really kind of preventing some forward momentum on renters' rights. Again, thank you all so much. And just real quick, people want to find out more about your organization. Where would they go?
Eli, you have that link, right?
So they could like us on Facebook at We the People MI Action Fund, or follow us on Instagram at We the People _MI. And I believe both of those will also link to the website.
Okay, and just one last reminder, if you want to take that 90-minute drive or find other people who are doing so, that's Lansing, state capital, going to be Tuesday, September 5th at 12 p.m. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for having us on. We really appreciate it. I hope that this helps get the word out.